everyone, and welcome to the Ion Can podcast, your home for in-depth discussion on lore, the High Republic, and the whole canon of the galaxy far, far away. My name is Joel, and I'm coming to you live from Underworld, Orange County. Matthew won't be here this week. He is on a break, but he'll be back next week. But don't worry, folks. We have an exciting episode for you all because we're going highway to the Death Star Zone. I just made that up. With a Legends look back covering the X-Wing Rogue Squadron comics. And joining us is, of course, my good friend, RogueLeader Antilles. How are you doing?
As we read further along with what we're covering, the homoerotic volleyball montage to playing with the boys is so accurate to some of the later arcs.
Oh,
Stackpole goes hard on that stuff. It's great.
I mean, people do call the X-Wing stuff just Top Gun in Star Wars, and I believe it. I buy that. I buy that a lot.
hmm
Ended up. So yeah. So of course you can follow us at Ion Cannon on Blue Sky, and there will be a tractor beam this week. Unfortunately, I don't remember what they're covering. But they're covering a lot, so look for that on Wednesday. And of course, you can follow us on the Star Wars Underworld Discord where we have game nights, movie nights, all that fun stuff. Last week we had a game night where we played some Fortnite, and we almost died by Godzilla. They have Godzilla now in Fortnite. I mean, you almost died by him. It was fun. um, so look forward to that as well. All right. Well, with that out of the way, let's get started with a week in Star Wars. And for this week in Star Wars, I have a very special week. I'm going to be reading to you a little bit an excerpt from The Mask of Fear. Book comes out in February 25th. It'll be covering the events right after Revenge of the Sith, like it's Revenge of the Sith year one, maybe even like day after Revenge of the Sith. So that's always a fun time. And it will be covering Mon Mothma, Bail Organa, and Saw Gerrera as they deal with the aftermath of the formation of the Empire. So, with that being said, I'm going to read a little excerpt here and get some reactions. All right, so here's an excerpt from Star Wars: Mask of Fear, Reign of the Empire by Alexander Freed. And it will be covering Mon Mothma's portion of the book. So here we go. I promise it's entirely adequate, Lud Morari said, pushing the gravy towards Mon. Wipe the taste of Heather Subian right out of your mouth. Mon laughed as she shook her head, but Lud insisted as she scooped up a helping with the flat bread and ate gracefully. The rich, savory sauce dripped across her chin. She barely glazed above to check to whether anyone had seen. Mon's eaten. Lud had been solicitous towards her since Zuna's murder, leaving daily messages of support and offering invitation to meals without insisting and without regard for how complicated his own schedule was. Mon had said no until she'd say yes, and now sitting with him, she reminded what it was like to have a friend. She didn't have many, outside politics beyond a few classmates she saw once or twice a year, not many in politics either. Maybe that was why she'd stayed with Perrin all this time. She looked up the plate, caught Luke's gaze, and rebuked herself. Those are dangerous thoughts. You really can't tell anybody about Hesperion, she said. Honestly, I thought I shouldn't have mentioned. I heard yesterday there was speculation about you and the Commerce Guild. She sighed. She trusted Lud, but she had no intention of telling him about Corons and others and she didn't intend to let him guess who she met through process of elimination. Can we drop it? Of course, Luke said. But can I say one thing? You don't have to tell me anything. I'm not asking. I just want the reason why we don't talk about our projects. He waved her off objections. 2 minutes, that's all. She looked around the restaurant. It was packed with a lunch crowd, maybe 100 dock workers jostling over trays. 2 minutes, she said. Luke stepped his hands and gathered his thoughts. You're whipping votes outside your usual coalition. Everyone knows, and certainly I respect the effort. It's hardly enough keeping my allies in line. I can't imagine winnowing your opponents. However, the people you're dealing with, and again, I'm not asking you to give anything away. I won't even watch your expression. He turned to the stained wall as his voice fell to a murmur. If you're building a coalition to oppose the administration, I wish you consider the optics. What optics? She asked. The optics of you assembling a group of the most privileged people in the galaxy, corporate tycoons, senators from royal families, and the wealthiest worlds in the core, as opposed to humble men like yourself from working class worlds like Troas? Troas? That's what's not pronounced. He scowled. You promised me 2 minutes. Mon helped her up her hand in surrender. Palpatine is a populist. The reason he appeals to worlds like Tross is because people there see him as making real changes in their lives. He cracked down on corporations. He ended the war. He's promising an era of out-of-touch politicians and 12th-generation nobility shaping the galaxy for their own benefit is over. She began. He's, this is her thinking. He's not giving power back to ordinary people. He's only shifting who holds it. He and his cronies don't care about your world any more than they care about mine. She stayed silent. What you're doing, Lute said, is only proving him right. The Galactiation of 2000 was, well, it was mad and foolish, an utter failure, but at least it was idealistic. It was built on principle, and people saw that, even if they didn't understand what the principle was. Now I know you're acting in and what you believe is the best interest in democracy. I know you, Mon, but my coalition of the rich and ultra powerful symbolizes what everyone hated about the Republic. Is that right? She pushed her chair back and lewd toward her. I think your 2 minutes are up. He called her name and apologized and stood. She told him it was fine, that she had business just back at the Senate, and she stayed too long already. She looked away when she saw the hurt in his eyes, hurried out of the restaurant herself. He's not the one who gets to be injured. He's not the one who gets to be angry. She shouldn't have cared what he thought. The commercial space docks were packed at this hour, and she had pushed through throngs of people and past hover shells laden with crates and cages and boxes of produce. She should have had security with her. The threats on her life were becoming in rapidly since Zuna's death and Mon's politicization of the tragedy. But she hadn't wanted anyone looking over her shoulder when she met Lude, and at least anyone other than her usual spies, who she assumed were tracking her every move, and who, if she was lucky, might bother to intervene if she was attacked. As she maneuvered toward the tram, she nearly bowled over a squat man in a farmer's cloak and cowl. She apologized sneakily and caught her wrist to keep from failing, but he hurried on, and she managed to board the car before it sped off to Federal District. She didn't think of the encounter again until she was back in her office, trying to comprehend the way Zuna's replacement had configured her calendar. Her wrist itched, and she rolled up the white sleeve to see if someone had scratched herself. There was a raft forming, blotchy and red. Each blotch centered a rash forming, blotchy and red, and centered in a dark brown dot. She began to scratch. He abruptly stopped as she saw the red blotches spreading like a stain. The brow of the center grew larger and darker. She thrust her arm away as if she could distance herself from whatever multiplying within her flesh. At the same time, she cried sharply and stumbled away from her desk. She needed a medic. She'd been affected. She shot poison when she boarded the tram, but there was no pain, only the faint itch, and even if it hadn't increased intensely, the spread of the blotches slowed, creeping to a stop. The dark spot was bleeding together, seeming to form patterns. These were the words appearing on her flesh, no larger than labels on the control panel. Tycho Noloville will speak to you. Someone was calling to her through the office door, asking whether it was all right. She suppressed the trembling and called back, I'm fine. I just dropped something. The ink shifted and wriggled again, forming new words to the old, no observers, no spies. What is this, a statement or demand? The itch began to burn. She wanted to clasp her wrist and squeeze, but she didn't dare touch the rash. The dark spots drew together and welled like a droplet of sweat ran down her wrist like the carpet. A few moments later, the tattoo had fully expelled itself and drained onto the floor. All that remained was the rash, already paler and less angry than it had been. She dropped into her chair and caught her breath. Her panic, her fear that she had witnessing her own assassination, caught up with her. She began shaking and tried to recall whether she had her anxiety medication. She was fine. People were trying to kill her, but she hadn't been that. She was fine. She permitted herself 5 minutes to pull herself together. She drank a glass of water, though she was thirsty. She stuck her head outside the office to question her aide calendar skill. Then Mothma began to plan. Whew! All right. So, Red, that was the excerpt from Alexander Free's Mask of Fear. What'd you think?
I think the guy's a traitor. I'm calling it.
Yeah, I'm calling it. But no, this is This is the book I'm very excited about. I love me some Revenge of the Sith aftermath stuff, and I love Alexander Freed because he's a really good author.
Hmm.
I love the. I think my favorite moment of this little excerpt was the whole you're allied with 12th generations of royal families, and it's like, yeah, the New Republic got a lot of royal families in them, um,
Yeah.
literally and figuratively. I'm I'm very curious. I don't know if you've been keeping up with this novel or not, but did this spark anything when I read it? As best I could.
That's definitely interesting stuff. I'm sure the saga era stuff is more what's meant for me and my taste, but
Oh, I'm
it's
sure.
nice seeing that political drama stuff. A lot of flashbacks to the like episode 1, episode 2 era, like when those were releasing. I mean, and the kind of novels we got at that time.
I mean, I'll give you a little taste of what Saw's gonna do because they released some quotes back in the day. Darn fly. Let me do my Saw voice. You debate in the Senate while people are dying. You have the habits of the people at peace, but there is no peace. You talked about treaties with the separatists, but the separatists never wanted a treaty. Now you seek to remove the emperor's power through the law, but the emperor doesn't care about the law. That's Saw. That's a Saw line for you.
Hmm.
And Bale's actually going to be in this book quite a bit. I'm excited to see him. He talks a lot about doing spy stuff, so I'm excited for that. But yeah, this book will come out February 25th. Anyone's interested? I can't wait to read it. All right. Well, that was my week of Star Wars. Now, I think we shall get to the main event. X-Wing, Rogue Squadron, Rebel Opposition. So Rogue Squadron, standing by. Yeah, let's just get into it. So I'll just give kind of like my general thoughts before we dive down into the nitty gritty. This is a very interesting comic to read after we did our Tales of the Jedi read through, because now we're going from hardcore fantasy space force magics. Now we're getting to the pilots, the soldiers, the everyman. You know, it's like sometimes they're spiritual and believe in the force, but other times they just want to get in that X-wing, fly in space, fight them TIE fighters. And it was very interesting. It's this very Air Force piloty storytelling, which is actually kind of interesting because I've actually watched a few movies lately that of World War II pilots from like the '60s that inspired Lucas. Oh, I forgot what they were called too. Maybe I'll look them up while we watch.
Do you watch Dam Busters?
It might have been. No, we haven't watched Dan, but no, we watched 633 Squadron. That was the one we
Hmm.
watched. But I think I did see a clip of Dan Busters a couple of months ago, which is
Dam
definitely
Busters is what inspired the Trench Run stuff, because it's
right.
all about having one run through a ravine or whatever to hit a dam perfectly, destroy it, and like that was what Lucas used for a lot of the uh, filler stuff when having the rough cut.
Right. I think I remember that from the SF Debris documentary. So it has a
Hmm.
lot of that, a lot of 633 Squadron. Um, and yeah, it was interesting to kind of get a taste of Stackpool's writing, as different from Veitch's as well. And overall, I liked it. It was very interesting. It was also kind of interesting to kind of see a very small scale mission, but kind of get little hints of like the wider geopolitics going on as well throughout the first little arc that we see in the in this comic run. And I know that later runs are gonna, if I remember correctly, we'll get into like a lot more of the big wigs than just your typical Governor Moth character as well.
Kind of, but it also focused. I think it kind of gets more focused on its own rogues gallery for the rogues. Uh, we'll get that in like 2 or 3 arcs from now, but it sets up. Stackpole sort of builds up the main villain from I Jedi retroactively as sort
Right.
of a reoccurring threat.
Well, I know that they deal with state pestage and Izard too, as
Hmm.
well in these books. Oh, I'll be interested because I don't remember who the villain for I Jedi is retroactively, so that'll be fun.
It's
Uh
that pirate who wants to screw Corin,
oh,
who
right,
kidnapped Mirex. Yeah.
right. But no, overall, I find these quite enjoyable. But Red, obviously, you're the pilots person in the name. What's it like going back to these comics, and especially in terms of like their relationship to the X-wing novels as well?
Yeah, it's funny. We went from Tales of the Jedi to this because Tales of the Jedi has, essentially it has to create a whole universe for itself, a whole setting, a tone, whereas this is so firmly placed within the movies.
Hmm.
It's literally a week after Endor is where we open. Uh,
Truth of
and
has already happened.
yeah, and like the half issue is literally like 24 hours before during A New Hope.
Right.
These issues are all very directly placed in the movies, and so you have all of this stuff directly established. Now, it does immediately introduce
Hmm.
a bunch of completely new tech, and it kind of has its own aesthetic to it.
Hmm.
But yeah, it's operating with the assumption that you more or less know that there's a new republic, there's a truce at Baccarat that happened, that the empire's sort of declining, but like it's definitely made with the intention that you're invested in what's already happening, but it doesn't do too much. It's the first arc because this wasn't ongoing, and
Right.
so it definitely tries to, yeah, I think connecting it directly to Endor is part of that, of trying to make it so okay, that's a common point for everyone who's going to picking up a Star Wars comic. You're assuming okay, they've all watched episode 6, and from there that's pretty much all you need to know. But
Right.
if you are someone who had read the Rogue Squadron books, which by this point were like 4 books deep, I think 3 or 4 books deep.
Hmm.
In fact, Stackpole might actually have left by this point. It might have been Alston. Uh, you get a bunch of backstory, and we'll get to that as we go through the plot. But there's a lot of placing this in because this is set before those books. This is building the Rogue Squadron. It's funny how much we sort of get like we have the Rogue Squadron novels, and then we get these Rogue Squadron comics to do the prequel of how that happens that end on a very like, okay, we're setting up the Rogue Squadron, from the beloved novels, and then like 5-6 years later, they do the Rogue Leader miniseries, and that is okay. We're setting up at the end of that the beloved characters from the Rogue Squadron comics, and like that ends literally with this squadron being formed, like standing in front of Wedge, because that takes place literally like 2 days after, and or they just got back from Bakura, so it's literally like less than a week after Endor, but after Bakura, it's like it's been 3 days since or it's been like 4 days since Bakura, 3 days since Endor. It's a lot of stuff happening.
It was a busy year, okay? No, yeah, I also think it's interesting that, just when these were written, how much a little bit of hindsight there was now. I mean, not like it's a lot of hindsight, obviously. I mean, the Bantam era wouldn't end for another couple years, I think.
Hmm.
Like, if I'm correct, like they're probably just
Uh,
now starting the Young Jedi adventures, right? Like,
Mm, uh,
we
when
would be that.
were these comics?
Apparently, the first one, Rogue Squadron 1, came out in July 11th, 1995.
Yeah. So, Bantam still has like 3 or 4 years left in it because I don't think they change until '98.
Well, I know NGL's like 98, 99, because I always remember because it's like that and the prequel are going on side by side, so it's like the
Yeah,
kind of
NGL
double
starts
whammy.
early '99, I believe.
Right, so it's kind of a double whammy there. But it's interesting that they were like now they kind of have a bit more of a here's like the really early Endor, and then Thrawn trilogy's like 5 years later. I actually remember listening, because I was listening to the kind of someone reading this comic as well. Somebody mentioned like the Empire has a new Grand Admiral maybe in charge, and I'm like, wait, that's a reference to Thrawn. 'Cause I remember somebody saying that in the comic.
Yeah, that's
That continuity error.
no, I think that's setting up for the villain of the next arc because the villain I was talking about, whose name I forget, her husband was a Grand Moff.
It's true. Um,
And so I think that's how that was, but I think it is definitely meant in the moment to make you think Thrawn.
That's possible. Okay, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised because it's just a stack pool after all. And I guess I'll ask this, Red. What did you make, or I guess historically, like with I mean, I guess it is cool that Stackpool got to write, but like, it's kind of nice just to kind of, he's continuing his work from the novels, and now he can add to the comics as well, so you can really get that jive of like these are more or less the same universes, quote unquote.
Hmm.
Um, which is nice. He's sort of building off his work. Did Alston ever write any X-Wing comics, or was it just Stackpool who did the comics?
I don't think Alston ever wrote comics.
That's a shame. That's too bad. That would have been nice. But yeah, you're right about the world building aspect as
Not
well.
just 13 Star Wars novels and several short stories.
Okay, there you go. Um, so
That's like a solid like 5% of all Legends novels.
it's true. It really is, especially post Endor.
Yep.
Um, at the time, which was the dominant at the time. But no, I think you're right. I think this book very much has these and Tales of the Jedi. I think are kind of like the bipolar, but also kind of dynamics of like, yep, Tales over here, really making its own world, kind of from with just only like aliens and a little bit of Star Wars aesthetics. But
Hmm.
here you have the comics, which are very grounded um in the original trilogy. I guess I'll ask one more thing before we get into the actual plot in terms of world building and the bigger stuff. What was it like reading these comics from what I'm looking at this as very much oh, you guys really only had the original trilogy to go back on this time. It's like which is something I always love doing when I read these comics of like, oh, this is very much what people thought Star Wars was in the 90s. Did any of that stand out to you in terms of like the world building or the
It,
lore or
it's
tone?
here in this first arc.
Hmm.
It pretty much immediately disappears because you get like an interdictor like 3 issues from now. You get like
Hmm.
all kinds of stuff. I think it's very clearly intended
Hmm.
to be welcoming to new readers who
Hmm.
haven't read any of the novels.
Hmm.
So like even the technology, when they add new stuff here, it's completely new. It's
Hmm.
not like instantly showing you, a TIE defender, and there is sort of what looks like an ATDP, sort of, kind of. I don't know what that second walker was, but like it's, and yeah, like the hover tanks and stuff, but those all seem to be local vehicles. Uh, the Empire and Republic have, their standard vehicles we're used to, its characters we're used to, and then from there you get into kind of what we think of as the Star Wars aesthetic because we grew up on stuff that was 10 years after the stuff had already been established,
Right.
and so you get a lot of that broader lore and specific stuff. Though even here you got like mentions of like repulsor lifts with the space trooper stuff. of like how the space troopers even move is because of repulsor tech, which is a neat little detail.
Yeah, I like that as well. I thought it was cool. I really liked seeing just Star Wars from the very grounded on the ground. Which is funny considering it's about X-wing pilots.
Hmm.
On the ground, you know, very Black Ops almost.
Yeah, there's not a lot of X-wing fighting in this, but it kind of makes the X-wing pretty special. Like when they come in, it's a pretty definitive victory. So the way Stackpole plots this
Mhm,
is at several points in the story when the X-wing comes in, it's actually a problem because it's they don't know there's a thing with Winter not knowing the Tycho's and the TIE fighter and stuff. Like they make the X-wings even scary to the heroes at some points, and so it becomes a cheat, and so they're very pulled back on that, building the strength of the X-wings so that shortly after, when you start going up against, Sunter Fell and stuff,
mhm.
you know how effective X-wings are. You know how effective this squadron is in its element, so that when they're challenged in that element, it's an oh crap, this is a serious moment.
No, I thought it was very effective as well. Let's get into it. We said we were gonna start with 1.5, and
Yep,
I realized I had the whole bandit thing on the whole time.
it's just
So
half.
just half. I
I that
we're half.
I thought it was zero issue because zero issue is a common thing in comics. I have never. This might be the only half issue I've remember reading.
I wonder if that's I wonder if that's a Dark Horse thing. Is it a Dark Horse thing to do halves, or was it just this story? I don't.
I mean, like Rogue Squadron Special had already been released, so that like okay, that was gone. Yeah, I'm not sure why, and it's never collected in trade with Rogue Squadron.
Uh,
It's not in New Republic Volume 2 of the Legends Epic collections that Marvel put out. It's in Empire Volume 8. It's not in the Dark Horse Volume 1 of Rogue Squadron that collects all of this stuff. It's in Dark Horse's The Other Sons of Tatooine compilation,
I
which seems like a good compilation if people can get their hands on that, but it's probably really expensive because it's out of print.
probably.
But it has the big stuff, which the Biggs arc from Empire, which is very very good.
Well, I mean, this has Biggs in it, so
Hmm.
then, that's why he's a son of Tatooine, and then at the end we see the other son of Tatooine. No, I liked it. This was a very cool little just Black Ops, like mission. You could see Biggs in action before he eventually meets his fate and explodes. Um, I just kind of cool just seeing the rogues do their thing. And then it's just kind of like, here's Luke Skywalker, and then get ready for the Death Star run. Um, I'll say this in terms of like lore stuff. It's kind of funny watching this and like, oh, this is like what the rebels were doing instead of Rogue Squad, not Rogue One. I'm gonna do that a lot, aren't I? Ah, dang! I always do that when I talk about Rogue Squadron and Rogue One. I'm gonna switch them up, and it's gonna get confusing. Um, but no, I thought it was cool overall. I guess I'll just ask it to you, Red. What do you think of one half?
Yeah, the half issue's fun. It sort of establishes some stuff for Porkins, for instance. The I have seen people talk about the line about heavier gravity on the planet
Mhm.
that he grew up on as a like silly excuse Legends had for they had to explain everything. I do not read that as literally a scientific thing he stated. I very much think in the context of the issue that is meant as an excuse he's making. Like it's
Ah,
not saying, he's just it's just because he's from a planet with low gravity that he has like stronger muscles or whatever to move. I think it's just he's a fat guy making a joke about no, I'm just big boned. That's what he's doing. It's very clearly not. But yeah, it for an issue that's like 10 pages, they do a good job establishing characterization for everyone.
yeah, I agree as well. Here's a weird question to ask. Um, I feel like I heard years ago that Porkins was actually going to be a pig guy, but they didn't have the makeup for it. Is that just a myth? that I just misremember, that I'm Mandela affecting in my head, or was that true?
I've never heard of that. I mean, maybe somebody was confusing that with Piggy, who is from the Wraith Squadron era of Rogue Squadron, who is a Gamorrean who's a pilot, and he takes the name Piggy, which people had used derisively for Porkins, and Wedge like explains to him how people made fun of Porkins and stuff, and Piggy takes that name because it's inspiring to him because he's made because people yell like racial epithets at him.
Right.
Uh,
Okay. I don't know why I felt like I've heard that before. Maybe I made it up in my head. Um, there's always little bits and bobs about Star Wars, which I'm never quite sure is this true or is this something I just misremembered. Um, but no, I liked it. I liked it quite a bit. I actually don't have much to say on this on the one half one.
it's very
Uh,
brief.
it,
I like the fact that the mission is something that's very like minor but important for logistical stuff. They're stealing a bunch of astromechs. They're not stealing this. They're getting a bunch of astromechs because the X-wings require them, which is just a nice touch and it's a nice reason for there to be a mission. Uh,
yeah.
and still ends up deadly, which kind of establishes that stakes of like, yeah, even this is the point where the rebellion is on its back foot. So even when they're doing supply runs, that can be life or death for them.
Oh no, I agree with that as well. And I just think it's kind of cute. Like, hey, here's Luke Skywalker. Dun dun dun. All right, but let's now go into Rebel Opposition. So, this was a fun arc. Again, I really like the very Spec Ops nature of it. I really like kind of the New Republic is still in its early days. I mean, it is very much directly post Endor, and they're linking up with like a local rebel group, and no one kind of trusts each other, and like they don't know like who the contacts are, and it's very much like kind of also deals with like how do the galactic factions deal with the local planetary factions. I love and I love the design of the soldiers as well. It's like has that kind of green, very earthy. I found that very
Mm-hmm.
interesting. And I love the little group with like the Wookiee with the life debt, and of course the lady, the head, Elsko. Is it Elsko? You pronounce her name? Who's
Yeah, I went with Elsko. Is how I was
Elsko?
assuming.
As sort of the leader of the little group. I thought that was interesting as well. But Red, what do you make of the overall mission and and the kind of the political dynamic we actually get to see here as well?
I like the fact that we're seeing the immediate consequences of Pandora as well as
Mhm,
how the New Republic is negotiating the creation of the New Republic, how they're dealing with former Imperial worlds, and things are still kind of shaken up in terms of communication. Like the the idea here with a Moff who was preparing
mhm,
to surrender to the rebellion, and then when the Empire crumbles, decides to stay with the Empire because he thinks, oh, here's my chance to carve up my own fiefdom.
Yeah, I like that little moment as well. I think it really speaks to showing planetary dynamics in Star Wars, which is something we sadly don't get a lot of in general. It's just kind of like the planet switched, or it's like they're it's just let's let planet more like a map on a fantasy territory.
Hmm.
Where but it's sort of like you get a little bit more. And I know we'll get more of the planetary stuff in later arcs because we talked about it with our Revolution episode. Just kind of like these planets have their local governments, and sometimes those local governments are more pro-rebel, but they can't be that open because of star destroyers above their head, or they are very pro-imperial and they got a pro-imperial government firmly in there as well. And it is interesting kind of seeing very much what you expect in these post-empire stories. That kind of is something that both cans do. It's like the Moffs, and the Jet governors, all trying to like, oh look, Palpatine's dead, time to make do with our own. Like some of them will surrender, some will decide, hey, I can be little mini emperor of my own sector, and Others will try to carve out deals. And yeah, it's like, well, what do you do in those sorts of situations? What did you make, Red, of the dynamic between the rogues and our local rebel cell led by Elsko, and kind of that dynamic?
I am still so confused about what they think at a given time. I've read this like 3 times over the years. I, why did they think the New Republic betrayed them?
And
Like,
didn't they
okay,
also at the beginning say they had like Imperials on them, like a rebel Imperial group together thing? Maybe I was misreading
no,
that.
they believe that the New Republic and the Empire are collaborating to destroy them. Why they think that that would be beneficial to the Republic isn't really explained. It's sort of just they say there was a rebel spy among them, but only what's his name, Vance or whatever, Vane, knows that. Oh, and I guess the previous leader, but then
Right.
they all get betrayed. It's kind of confusing. We needed tension, but needed to also be wrapped up quickly. I kind of wish it was maybe something more like there's just a distinct difference between what they want for the planet. If they either
Mhm.
don't want to join the New Republic or something, instead of, oh, one spy, there was a spy, but there was an Imperial spy as well who sold them out but pretended it was the rebel spy, and so this miscommunication. It's too many layers for not enough of a payoff, I think.
Yeah, it always comes off as like, no, you guys are just not listening and not talking to each other. Just let Wedge explain. I'm sure this can all be sorted out. Um, yeah. I mean, Elsko's kind of cool. I mean, she's got a little bit of that kind of '90s. She kind of the tough girl, very feisty with Wedge, and they're kind of
Well,
always
she's
going back.
also like, I got serious like Sandinista vibes just because the era, like
I don't know.
like female revolutionary soldier fighting in the jungle, in charge,
I mean,
family
the
wiped
dude looks
out.
like Aztec temples in some of the artwork. It's like,
Yeah, and like the reprisals against her entire family and stuff. Like it's very much has the vibe of Sandinistas, just redheads instead of brown people, because this is still the '90s in Star Wars. Uh,
yeah. Star Wars loves its redheads. I mean, Luke would marry a redhead, so. Um, yeah, I thought that too. I mean, looking at the artwork, there's very Central American vibes, and obviously there's some Vietnam stuff. Like one of the
mhm.
soldiers looked like a Vietnam War vet uniform with like the green uniform. Even the blasters look more like typical guns than they do like Star Wars blasters in some of the artwork.
Yeah, for sure. There's a lot of it's very earthy. We get a lot of tanks and treaded vehicles and stuff. I really I did enjoy seeing that stuff because we the good guys in Star Wars rarely have ground vehicles in this era. So even if
Yeah,
it's just like local stuff that they picked up, it's kind of nice.
yeah, it's and of course the Empire has its tanks.
And the Empire has a new one out of nowhere for a few pages for some reason.
Yeah, it's actually kind of cool seeing the Empire with like legit tanks and not just like a walker, which are
Yep.
kind of always kind of the substitute for the tank. Although I've always liked the oh, what are the like the floaty tanks? You play them in Battlefront, and they're kind of in the Clone Wars video game on the GameCube.
THX tanks, I think.
Oh, they're called TH. Yeah, yeah, those ones with like they got like the gun that kind of fires the blaster like
Yeah, the beam
beam.
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Um.
the and I love the I mean there's a reason I have the black series of it. The tank from Rogue One is great.
Oh, I love the tank from Rogue One.
Just a chassis, just a solid block chassis that's just meant to carry stuff.
That is a tank. Um. No,
I'm sure
I
someone's like, no, it's technically a technical. Doesn't have the exact right because tank is such a specific thing for some people.
yeah, that's true.
Is a tank only a main battle tank, or is a was it Tuchanka from the Russian Civil War a tank, which is a horse-drawn sled with a Maxim gun on the back?
Dang. Well, you gotta do what you gotta do. No. Also, there's like, I swear, like in issue 4, there is something that looks just like the LAAT carriers. Not LAT. I'm sorry. Oh shoot, I'm forgetting what they're called. They're in episode 3 in Kashyyyk. They're your favorite tank, thing.
The turbo tank?
You know, the one with the big wheels, the big truck. The
Yeah, yeah,
HAV8, the Juggernaut, the Juggernauts.
yeah. The Juggernaut. Before we kind of is it the one that when they capture or when
Yeah, when they capture.
the second time that Tycho has to be like, oh, I just crashed. I'm totally an Imperial pilot.
Yeah, it looks like. I mean, this is the one where Winter is on as well. Oh,
Yeah, yeah, that thing.
it kind of looks like it. It looks like an old prototype.
Yeah, kind of. Now that I think about it, I think this thing might actually be an Empire in Corey's mod for Empire at War.
Ooh, I hope it is.
Maybe. Kind
That'd
of
be
looks familiar. And there's that ATDP looking thing above it.
right. Oh, and speaking of the Empire, I should have brought this up when we talked about the tone. Do they do the Z Kyle? I swear they're doing this full on.
They do. It's a
They do
mix between. It's a mix between a Sig Heil and Talk to the Hand.
I know. Talk to the hand.
It's in the movie. That, and now I'm trying to remember.
Well, they
Like,
do
in the
this in
movie,
Force Awakens. They do
yeah,
the
yeah.
fist.
They have the fist in front, like at like chin level. Uh, but in the films, in the original trilogy, don't we have a like just standard salute? Like,
I don't.
doesn't someone walks up to Piet while he's talking to Vader? I think at some point in Empire, and like very quickly salutes. Or maybe I'm thinking it's either that, or I am for some reason confusing that with a gag in a Yugoslav war film, Batter of Neratva, where like the German guy shows up and it's a big deal. He has this like SS trench coat and stuff, and it's the big spooky German, and they're like, okay, we have the mission to discuss, and they're like, wait, the Italian delegation still isn't here for some reason. He's like, if the Italians were going to be useful, they'd be here. Just goes ahead.
I don't remember anyone doing a full Imperial salute in Empire.
I think it's like a quick one, kind of like just like walking up just to give something to Piet. Salutes, walks away.
Maybe. Are you sure you're just not thinking of Mel Brooks's?
Maybe.
But no, I found that kind of funny. I just in terms of like depicting the Empire in this comic. Which I guess we'll switch to that. How did you feel the Empire was depicted in this comic book for the 90s? With the full on talk to the hand.
Yeah, I like the fact that the Empire here
Mhm.
is just a small little garrison that's going for like as much torment as possible in the local place. I do wish we got more of whatever the heck the capital city is. We only hear about like the two suburbs, and
Mhm.
we get brief like the existence of the governor's palace is only established when they're storming it, and it's one panel outside at the governor's palace, and I'm like, wait, I wish there was more geography kind of being explained for how much they go through. Like, here's where they store the X-wings away, and here's these suburbs that got burned. Uh, I would have liked a little bit more stuff for the planet itself, especially
Mhm.
because there was some interesting stuff with when Tycho was infiltrating and like the normal civilian being like, "Oh, hi, Imperial pilot, how you doing, man?" Like, just they're chill with it, and it's kind of creepy and interesting. But then never gets followed up on.
Yeah, it's always kind of cool seeing the kind of the more intimate moments with the Empire. Obviously in the movies, all you have, you always have like either you're following the elite, you're following Vader, you're following the Emperor, you're following Tarkin. The big galactic leaders of the Empire. What's Governor Big Guy doing? What's
Yeah.
I
The
like
one we
how
have is the you hear they're replacing the T516s? It's what? No, why we're getting that one conversation on the Death Star that's just ADR'd in. It's a
yeah.
very nice bit.
Oh yeah, yeah, that's a good moment. I also kind of like the governor in general, his plan because like, he's this is very much like he's governor, but he's only got like a small position. It's like this is the best I sadly can do. But if I can, do some political maneuvering, then I can actually get into a nicer job. Maybe
Yeah,
be a
it's just like this is just stepping stone, just a career thing.
governor of like a core world. That'd be fun. Um, very
Yeah, it's like
Roman.
he's on a planet that is like one city.
Yeah, it's always kind of cool seeing like he's such he's a big fish in a little pond, right? And he's
Hmm.
probably compared to the bigger fish out there. Um, you know, not as important. Um,
Yeah, but yeah, I like the fact that the Empire throughout this
mhm,
does have to worry about replacing stuff. They're kind of only holding on because there's a Star Destroyer above the planet, which we never even see, which is kind of interesting as sort of just the looming threat of that. Like it
mhm,
takes time to dislodge Imperials when there is a Star Destroyer, but once that's gone, it's pretty easy. There's sort of an implication there of how weak the Empire is right now. That it relies so heavily on being able to supply itself with all the surplus that it has,
mhm.
but like they don't have enough pilots. They have more, TIE fighters than they have pilots. Uh,
No, that's something that one of my favorite later books that I read involved Galactic Empire went into. It's like I mean, don't get me wrong. The Battle of the Endor is important, and all the sacrifice and the moment of Vader and the Emperor and Luke. But yeah, it does seem like the continued through line here is the Empire's true downfall was logistics, as most regimes do. They just didn't have the logistics or the oil or the money. They were broke. Logistics, they are the key to survival. No, that's cool. And also, like, really shows just how kind of, yeah, Star Destroyers can be scary, but they're also kind of useless. I mean, I don't want to say they're completely useless, but, it's more like, they're more for show. You're right. It's like,
yeah, and like they can supply stuff, but when there's no use in completely just destroying the planet surface,
mhm.
then they can't really do precision at all.
And it probably doesn't help with like a jungle world where you can kind of go full on guerrilla mode and it's like
Hmm.
no major urban areas to control. And everyone's spread out in the villages. Again, Vietnam, Sandinistas, all that stuff. I like that. I like just seeing kind of the officers, a lot more officers. Not, I felt like there weren't a lot of stormtroopers compared to regular soldiers, although there were quite a few at the
Yeah,
time.
it's interesting how it seems like I liked how you got a variety of types of equipment and troops.
Yeah.
Like there's sort of the implication that everything they have is they have less of everything, but so that kind of means that there's going to be a jumbled together thing of elsewhere a jump trooper, you're going to have like a a huge amount of jump troopers on one mission. We're not going to see them in your average battle, but like there's one jump trooper very briefly in like the first real skirmish we see who
Hmm.
gets blown away. He doesn't even use the jetpack in it, but he's clearly got a jetpack. And it's a little stuff like that of like, okay, yeah, even just your standard squad or whatever here has these specialized equipment because they probably have like 200 stormtroopers, five jump troopers, one space trooper, one tie advanced, stuff like stuff like that. So they're going through the entire inventory in one battle. They're running through everything because okay, all the specialized units they maybe have, but they don't have a lot of them. and they don't have a lot of anything, so all of that stuff's used at once, even if it's, you know, we're not used to that particularly.
Do you think um do you think the book did a good enough job at, kind of, while obviously remaining small scale for this particular mission, kind of giving you a wider sense of the galaxy and kind of again building upon what has come before? Obviously, kind of the only thing that really you can hint at is the Thrawn trilogy that's coming up, and I think stuff like Izard probably was already established by then.
Yeah, the Rogue Squadron books have already come out. So like Winter's established, Isard is established,
Right.
Zinj has been mentioned a bunch of times prior to this. All the source books exist. Tusif Bakura exists. The Children of the Jedi trilogy or the Callista trilogy has already come out. The Black Fleet Crisis has already come out. I think the Corellia trilogy is happening around this time, or like being released at this time. Maybe that's already come out, or like is coming out that year. So
Hmm.
like we're like halfway through Bantam stuff.
Right. So yeah, I was just, so yeah, it's kind of nice to kind of continue to flesh that out. Um, Although I always find it funny that in terms of like the big name warlords, they don't get fleshed out until really the Essential Guide many decades later.
Yeah, I
Uh,
mean Zinj is just like an offhanded threat that is posed to Isard before we get Solo Command. That finally is like, okay, I will do a story. Or wait, no, he first shows up in Courtship of Princess Leia, and then
right.
we build back from him from there.
He dies in courtship in Princess Leia, right?
Yep,
And then we build.
he
Okay.
dies in his first appearance.
It's very Thrawn, right? It's like Thrawn again, where he dies in his first appearance, then we build backwards.
Hmm.
So yeah. No, I always think that's kind of interesting as well. Very, you can see the building blocks of this universe. Um, I mean, I guess let's talk about the rogues themselves. Let's talk about your boy, your favorite, Mr. Wedge Antilles. How do you think Wedge handled himself in this first arc?
Yeah, Stackpole sort of just direct. I mean, he's not even scripting any of these. All of the arcs are scripted by different people. Stackpole's doing the plotting, but I assume he like oversaw some of the writing or character stuff for all
I
of those
think it
characters.
says written by Stackpool, but let me check.
Not plotted by Stackpole.
Okay,
The script is
Mike
uh
Barron.
yes, Mike Barron. Yeah, plotted by Stackpole, script by Barron.
Okay, okay, interesting.
Yeah, comics will do that, especially when they're having like test people. But like all of these arcs have like different scripters. But I assume with like the rogues and stuff, that's probably Stackpole doing the majority of that or giving approval on stuff. Because everyone is very in character with their book incarnations,
Right. I mean,
like
that's
Jansen and Tycho in particular.
right. Again, kind of cool to see Wedge very much on the ground. Um, along with the rest of the rogues. As you mentioned earlier, were like not in their X wings until like the proper moment. Um, but no, I enjoyed the rogues. I saw, even though they're not together that much, they're definitely split apart. It's kind of cool, kind of seeing them, work as a team, but also as individuals, kind of going off on their little separate little side missions as well. Oh, before I forget, in terms of the rebel group, did you notice that one of them was named Chang, and he had the mustache?
Yeah,
Yeah, the '90s, the '90s. I just wrote in my notes, Chang. That's a choice.
there's a Fu Manchu stash. Yeah,
Yeah, yep. I don't think he does much. I just remember seeing that.
he just cremates the guy.
Yeah. Oh,
I do
and
love Wedge at the end of the story being like, "Damn, the trader guy got eaten by wild animals." He's like, "Damn, I wanted to decorate the lampposts." It's such a good line. It's like Wedge is like, "Hey, New Republic's not established here. Ain't no war crime yet."
that's true. That's true. Um, Oh, speaking of the funeral stuff, I like the fact that we actually get to see a Force eulogy. Kind of, it's short, but it's like they say the Force was kind enough to loan us this good man for a while, and now we like to return him to the Force with our thanks. I don't know. I just think that's kind of interesting. Kind of like, oh, that's what a eulogy in Star Wars is kind of like. I just thought that was very interesting. Um,
Yeah, it's interesting because when we get like funerals for Jedi, we never really have people speaking.
just get burnt.
Yeah, like no one, I mean, maybe someone said something earlier in Obi-Wan's fake funeral or Qui-Gon's actual funeral, but we're kind of just focused on people staring stoically.
I thought Mundi said something at Kenobi's fake funeral, but
Maybe he does.
all I remember is everyone
This
was
guy,
laughing at his hood because of
this man is very clearly dead and gone forever, and not at all a spy, and not standing in the room with us.
and not letting Anakin know is an okay thing.
And he's not even, uh, like, Moody wasn't even in on it and trying to, like, cover up. He just is always wrong. And so he's just like he's speaking from the heart there.
True, so true. Yeah, I just thought it was interesting, especially from a non-Jedi character, right? I always think the Force is always very interesting from the perspective of non-Jedi or Sith, in terms of like how they view it and how they use it. Um,
Yeah, I sometimes forget that Dennis Lawson, not Wedge, voiceover in A New Hope on the PA system says "May the Force be with you" when the action was taking off. It was like Hainer Bay doors open, like exit accordingly. May the Force be with you. It's like, oh yeah, people like in universe believe in the Force, like sort of. That's always sort of ambiguous.
a podcast I really like called The Daughter of the Ferrex, and I brought this up on my own podcast. We did a whole thing, not together. This is two separate things of like, is can Force atheism be a thing, and like, how much is the Force actually responsible? Can we actually prove it? And it's very funny. Um,
Oh, 100%. There. I mean,
oh yeah,
we've
my Han, kind
we've
of.
definitely. Well, I mean, just like people who believe in the Force, but not that it's a deity. Because we get that sort of with Gariel in Truce at Bakura, sort of. Though there is more of a philosophical element to that, but there definitely be people who would acknowledge the Force existing, but have either agnostic stuff or have a more just purely scientific view. I mean, always gets into the weird thing that Star Wars has literal ontological evil.
I mean, yeah, I mean, it's more like from perspective, kind of, than from an outside point of view of like ontological evil. Like, this is sort of a weird example, but it's the only one I can think of the from the dark side perspective. Gallius Rex was talking about how, yeah, the Emperor was a brilliant politician, and he did have these weird powers, which no one understood. But it's like, I always thought he was a little crazy when every time he talked about like the dark side and this malevolent force. It's like, I actually find that kind of funny. Where like even like some of the people who knew Palpatine had these powers were like, "You're a good politician. You're a good evil politician, Palps." But this dark side stuff, even I think, is kind of weird.
Yeah, it's like there was a there was something I saw on Reddit like the other day, like yesterday, uh, that was exactly that, but like an actual historical example. Uh,
Because they have to believe in some ways that Vader and the Emperor have like telekinesis and can do weird things with zap their hands and lightning comes out.
yeah, and doesn't he do that in front of Rax when he meets him as a kid?
He does it to a couple. I mean, he does it in front of a bunch of people at times. So yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
but I mean, like Max's first introduction to him is, or maybe that's not. He just like runs into him in Masamita.
I mean, Vader force chokes a guy in front of the conference room, and even they're like,
Yeah, yeah. I just
"Force is-"
mean in terms of Rax's relationship to that stuff.
yeah. I mean, I'm sure he probably saw. I mean, in a bunch of times in Palpatine's presence. But
Oh yeah, so there was this report of God, I don't know where this is from, but it's the citation number for it is 1366. So clearly a big book. Uh, later Mussolini would recall that Hitler had told him that he was, quote, mystically and scientifically convinced of being possessed not by a demon, but by the spirit from Aryan mythology prehistory, end quote, which caused Mussolini to feel, quote, completely disoriented.
I've, I've always
It's
loved
just
I've always loved their
insane.
relationship because it's like it makes Mussolini like the rational one of the two.
I mean, there's that thing that Young has this whole thing about Hitler as like when he's doing his speeches and stuff, he might as well be Wotan, which is the Germanic Odin.
Mhm.
Odin, like he might as well be a shaman, and he's incorporating like the spirit of the German people in his mind. That so much so that for them he becomes that in that moment, and then he describes Mussolini as just a man. It's like Mussolini's just some guy. He's just some fucking guy.
Oh, you guys said
Who is he?
send that to me later. That's hilarious. But no, it's very interesting. Kind of seeing those moments. I mean, Akbar in Return of the Jedi goes, "May the Force be with us" when they're about to attack the Death Star. It's almost like God be with us on this
Yeah,
day.
yeah.
Um, so I thought that was pretty neat. As well. Uh, what'd you make of Tycho and Tycho's subplot in the cave with
Wes Jansen.
Wes Jansen? Good sort.
Yeah, you got a little bit of the Hurt Comfort homoerotic fan fiction. Liked it. Uh, but even though Derek hobby is elsewhere throughout this, they are the ones who are like so much homoerotic subtext with them very intentionally throughout the X-Free books, where they're like, no, we swear we're not.
But
So Seinfeld, it's not that there's anything wrong with that.
uh,
It's
yeah, 90s man.
I mean,
Uh,
it's very fun dynamic with Wes. Wes being that's you get like the pessimistic stuff from Wes because in canon he just dies when he crashes in that deleted scene into Veers' AT-AT. In Legends, that deleted scene happens, but he survives, but is severely wounded and sort of has like a glib attitude towards death afterwards.
as you would probably.
Yeah, and so he makes like really dark jokes where people are just like, "Are you gonna like just intentionally get yourself killed on this? Because I want a reassignment then. If you want to die on this mission, I don't. I don't want to be your wingman." And he's like, "No, I'm mostly just kidding about that." It's like, and it's part of his sense of humor as well. And him and Hobby play off each other very nicely. But it's nice seeing him and Tycho bond and him getting the reveal about Tycho's backstory. Yeah, Tycho's the real star of this.
No, I mean he. I mean they get into the palace with Winter. By the way, it was nice to see Winter. Poor Winter though, having to play Leia and go with the governor, and it's like she probably knows, like, oh, is this what Leia has to deal with all the time?
Yeah, I mean, it's great how it's like this. For some reason, on this mission, she's pretending to be. I don't know if she was pretending to be Leia earlier to the leader of this resistance, the original guy, uh, Elcor, Elsor,
Mhm,
whatever her name is, his husband. I'm
mhm.
not sure if that's what she was going for, but it's funny that for this she's putting on the thing of being Princess Leia, but then later in a future arc we have Winter going to negotiate with Saint Prestige, but it's actually Leia, and they're literally climbing through sewers.
Uh I think the moment I felt so bad for Winter was during the dinner, and the officer's like, "The governor wants you to wear this." Like, oh no,
Yeah.
poor Winter. Also, I don't know why Tycho look. This is gonna sound weird. Tycho looks like a more muscled, Chad-looking Luke Skywalker. He's just drawn that way, doesn't he? Am I the only one who thinks that? He got like
Yeah,
the Luke
Tycho kind of does.
hair, but it's like more muscly, less twinky. Luke. I don't know.
Yeah.
I think it's also more blonde. Luke at this point
Hmm.
had more brown hair at this point.
Yeah, he's definitely meant to be like a pretty boy.
Um,
First, unassuming,
excuse me.
and we get that interaction
Mhm.
with the pilots, which I love seeing the Imperial pilots also having squadron dynamics and stuff.
Yeah, I mean that was fun too. It's this is kind of go back to tone. It's very interesting. I'm kind of again going back from Tale of the Jedi to have more of I'm gonna call it a lighthearted tone, if you know as lighthearted as you can get with action. Um, I think Star Wars a lot of the time can veer a little into the bombastic and the operatic and the maybe even uber serious from time to time. Um, while this, I would argue, I mean, I'm not saying things can't have their darkness, of course, but this always had a sense of fun, right? Like in the sort of like everyone is kind of very like kind of like snipey dialogue and like kind of like great shot and like I'm hallucinating here. I think I'm seeing Leia. It's like um obviously you have your moments of like somberness with like deaths of the rebels and stuff. But overall, I
And the
thought it
whole
was really
Alderaan thing.
and the Alderaan thing, of course. But outside of that, I thought this very lighthearted tone. I was wondering, did this match a lot of what you remember from the X-Wing books in terms of the tone and kind of matching that vibe?
Uh, kinda. I mean, this is more mission than we get in most of the X-Wing books.
Interesting.
A lot of that is set at a lot of those are set at base and just building stuff up. A lot more character dynamics. You usually get like 3 or 4 fights a book.
Hmm.
I mean, again, it really comes down to like the characterization. Is this exactly what you get with the books, if nothing else?
That makes sense. Again, though, I did do love the. Actually, I'm gonna look something up because I wonder Top Gun. This. Oh yeah, it definitely there had to be some Top Gun inspiration though, right? Because Top Gun was '86, and
Yeah, that's mentioned in the tagline in the first X-Wing book.
oh nice. Um, so I was right on that. Let's see. I'm just trying to go through my notes to see if is there anything I haven't brought up that you would like to bring up, just to make sure? What do you think of the action moments? Like, what do you actually think of the fights themselves?
Uh, did pretty good. Nothing looks spectacular, but you definitely get a decent sense of the geography when they're fighting, so it's not super clustered or disconnected. Uh, One thing that I absolutely love is you can tell they're drawing all the ships. Like there's like we got this especially in the half issue where when we see the star destroyers in the background, like they are misshapen, and one of them is like just super squat and is like maybe 10 lines making it up, and it's like God, I miss when Star Wars comics would actually draw. Like
Ye-
the artist clearly drew the ships. They did not place a model over it. They did not copy and paste something from the movies or a CG model or even one if they did, they drew for real and then maybe copy and pasted their own mock-up that they drew from scratch, but they drew it in several different poses and things, and then they're clearly drawing how it's interacting with the environment and stuff. Like
Even the TIE fighters don't look all the same, which is nice.
yeah, I mean they look off color in that neat way that TIE fighters do a lot of the time. Or like
Uh,
sometimes they look like a really dark gray, sometimes they look blue, sometimes they look light gray, like they kind of canonically are.
even the wings are like sometimes they're really like shorter, sometimes they're like really like elongated. How I would draw
Hmm.
them when I was a kid. So no, I agree. I like seeing that a lot. Also, I saw I remember the panel with the TIE Advance. There's like one scene with
Yeah.
like a TIE Advance in there. Um, Also, it's interesting. The TIE pilots aren't wearing their helmets. At least some of the shots in some of the panels. We see a lot of kind of the long, elongated black helmets in the back, and they have like goggles.
Are they
Um,
the ones wearing the goggles? Oh yeah, they are as well. Yeah, that's interesting. I know with that Empire comic I was talking about that gives Biggs's backstory, uh they have like a transparent faceplate on TIE fighter helmets, and the comic even goes out of its way to have a little editorial box saying this is not actually what is there, but for the sake of the comic, we want to have the face visible. But it like goes ahead and is like this is just for visual reference purposes. There's no oxygen in a TIE fighter, so they do canonically have the TIE fighter map. Like just little things like that back when we used to have editorial notes more often. That's a hobby horse of some people that we nowadays just in comics in general don't get those as much.
right, right. Um, Also, just kind of go back to the rebels. It's nice seeing like a diversity of aliens. You have a Celestian, you have a Twi'lek,
Hmm.
uh, and Wookiee. I kind of found it funny. It's like, oh, another Wookiee with a life debt. I guess that's a thing that happens quite often. It's
Yeah,
Star
the thing of like anytime you see a human hanging out with a Wookiee, it can only mean one thing or whatever she says, and it's like Wookiees can have friends like that. They don't just venture out, to get life debted to someone.
No. They're part of the galactic community. Actually, that's a
Lump
question.
Lumpy
Oh,
does not have a life debt to Jason and Jaina. He is just their friend.
exactly. Um, Actually, here's a kind of a weird question since I'm bringing up Wookiees, and maybe you know. Wookiees, Kashyyyk was part of the Republic, right? Like officially? Yeah, because there's like Wookiee senators in
Yes,
episode
yes.
one.
There's Wookiee senators in episode 1. Yeah.
Do we ever find out who the senator from Kashyyyk is? Like, who's that person? Do they have a
I'm almost certain in Tor we got that.
only in Tor, not in the prequel era? We don't know who.
We probably get that mentioned. I mean, like I think we meet them. Uh, Yarua is the one that we see in the movies.
I just always think it's interesting. Like we should explore that. Like who's like do they have like a translator droid? Do they do they speak basic just to communicate? You
During a
know.
mission to the moon of Stagek, early in the Clone Wars, he was in possession of a valuable item which he hid inside a doll owned by his daughter. When Grievous attacked the moon, he died after pushing himself and Grievous out of an airlock.
Oof.
Huh.
Rip.
Uh, so from hyperspace stories and oh, he's mentioned in he's in Queen's Shadow and
Oh
Queen's
nice.
Peril.
Oh nice. Okay. So there's at least something there. But yeah,
Oh, that's interesting. So the he's the one from episode 1. The
he goes.
original Chewbacca costume was used. So
Ooh.
it's like the stretched out older Chewbacca costume. Nice.
I mean, it's only the background shot, so yeah. I always remember where it's like, oh no, wait, isn't he also? Aren't there Wookiee senators in Attack of the Clones as well when they're like cheering for like, yay, give Palpatine the emergency powers, yeah.
If there are, he's not one of them.
Okay, I always remember Wookiee scream and then vote now, vote now. Um, the I also have recently seen the deleted episode 1 scene where Senator Antilles from Alderaan.
Bale Antilles, yeah.
Bale Antilles. Not related to Wedge at all. But no, I remember
that was supposed to be Bail Organa.
he took his wife's name. Actually, no, that's still canon. He took his wife's name. You're gonna.
Yeah, but like I mean, like script wise, that was Bail Organa originally, but Lucas decided last minute to change to Antilles, and then they cut the scene anyways. But that was Bail Organa.
That was Bail Organa. That would have been something. Just trying to think of also what I might have missed. I'm kind of running out of things to say, but I mean, I enjoyed this. This was a fun kind of mission of the week, or arc of the week, or arc of the month, because I'm sure it doesn't come out in a week. Adventure. It reminds me, I guess, a little bit. I mean, I'm not quite sure how the Rogue Squadron books continue on. I remember a little bits and pieces here and there, but of kind of like Tales of the Jedi, where it's sort of like we kind of start small. I don't know if we get bigger. Do we get bigger as we go on? Kind of the
In the comics or the novels?
in the comics. I mean, in this comic run, like the story kind of got bigger.
Yeah, I mean, you're fighting like Star Destroyers down the line. They're kind of going up in terms of targets. Like this whole mission is just supposed to be a supply run on their way to Muralist.
Muralist or Muralist?
Muralist.
Okay.
Muralist. They spell it differently in this than it usually is.
Muralist. Well, that's fair. And then Elsko joins in at the end, and they're like, "My squadron, you drive. You're driving." There's like big takeoff. Dun 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 dun. Just nice. I love the big stormtrooper costume, the one with like has like the helmet with a
The space
soda.
trooper.
Yeah, the helmet looks like one of those soda drinker things that you'll see in sports places.
Yeah, he has the beer helmet.
And the Imperial hot tub. That's just kind of funny. I'm just looking through some of the art and stuff.
We get a little joke about Tycho flying a land a shuttle because that's what he's stuck with in the early Rogue Squadron books.
I find it funny he calls it a truck. It's like trucks exist in Star Wars. I mean,
yeah, I think we see them in the movies. It's just a speeder carrying cargo, I guess.
That's fair. Yeah, I remember the end. It's like, I had to pilot that thing. That thing's a truck.
Yeah, and man's gonna get stuck in that with no weapons.
I remember having to pilot the dang Lambda shuttles in those Rogue Squadron missions on the GameCube. It's like, this thing is so slow. I'm getting shot at all over and trying to escape. Like,
And I'm pretty sure that's faster than the Sentinel.
Probably is. So there's yeah, I remember that. Yeah, I guess I'll give the final thoughts on this arc. I really liked it. Again, it's funny kind of going to this after Tales, where Tales is so force and mystical and there's wizards. Here it's sort of like down to brass tacks, back to the original trilogy. Even more grounded than the original trilogy. This is almost like, I would argue, like more A New Hope without Jedi involved and only little bits of the Force. Because Return of the Jedi and Empire, I think get a little bit more mythological than even that. This kind of really strips down Star Wars back to, it's about the pilots, man. About the pilots. It's like Squadrons 366 and the damn movie. And obviously Top Gun. And really just kind of seeing normal pilots kind of just doing their spec ops thing. You know, there's no threat of the dark side. I mean, obviously the Empire's evil, so there's that. But you know, it's there's just normal evil authoritarian dictatorships that we're gonna take down, and we're gonna deal with like local militias and whatnot. So I quite enjoyed it. It's definitely, if you're willing to kind of embrace this tone of Star Wars, I highly recommend it. But Red, final thoughts on this, and anything you'd like to bring up before we wrap up?
Yeah, it's definitely a kind of simple, nice and easy start. to it. It's it serves what it's doing and provides a little bit of a look into the new squadron. Uh, Delur and Plor being like the two we kind of get focus on
Mhm.
here, and from there, we will sort of develop them out from here. Later we get the Quarren and the Mon Calamari, stuff like that. But they take time to develop them.
Right. This is still very. This is. I mean, it's not the early days. Still, we're still way in from Bantam books, but even the deeper stuff still on its way. But yeah, that was the Rebel Opposition, Arc 1 of the X-Wings comics. Let me get my banner. Doop-a-doop-a-doop. But thank you everyone for joining us. Oop, let me put this one on. We had a great time, of course. Thank you again, Red, for joining us this week. This was fun. Start a new Legends series of X-Wing books. Since you're more in the know of trade and stuff, if anyone wants to read this, where can they find it?
Epic Collection. Marvel released the Epic Collection New Republic Volume 1. Sorry, Volume 2.
Mhm.
That has the RogueLeader book, some Star Wars tales, the Rogue Squadron special, and this stuff up to issue 16.
Nice. And unfortunately, if you want 1.5, that's gonna be a little harder to find. Get your eBay money ready.
Yeah, you can find it on archive.org,
Or
in the Sons of Tatooine, or other Sons of Tatooine,
thank you,
currently at least.
archive.org. So yeah, there you can find it there. If you like this episode, comment below. Let us know. Did you read the X-Wing comics as a kid growing up? Do you remember these fun pilot adventures? Did you read the X-Wing books as well? Maybe we'll run into a certain Imperial head of intelligence whose eyes may or may not mean something. I don't think they do.
I think they mean that, like, she's a normal person with not many distinct or contrasting personality traits. Very
Yeah,
straight laced.
pretty straight laced person. The eye color red and blue. That doesn't mean anything.
Very temperate.
Yeah,
Not one temperature or the other.
perfectly balanced as all things shall be. That'll be fun when we get to Izard. I like
God,
Izard.
I've like slowly been reading through the second Rogue Squadron book, and like especially by that second one, it's every freaking description. Oh my god,
Oh man, that's I.
it's Stackpole with sardonically and warbles.
Oh goodness, he's spending too much time with Tim's on. Um, does Talon Card show up in these comics at all? Or
He gets mentioned in this
that's right.
arc, yeah.
Oh, that's right.
He does. Him and Mirax do.
Stackpole's the only one allowed to touch Tim Zahn's characters with Tim Zahn's approval.
Oh wait, Mirax isn't a Tim's. Mirax shows up. I don't know if Talon Card physically does show up. Booster Terex and Mirax do. Maybe Talon is mentioned, and yeah, I'm not sure.
Okay. I mean, I always remember someone saying, "I heard they got a new Grand Admiral in charge," but I think that might be hinting something else than Mr. Big Blue. It's too early for him. He's still in the Unknown Regions.
Yeah, we're 7 years out from him.
Right. Maybe one of the other 12 Grand Admirals. But yeah, that'll be fun to get to. Be fun to get to Baron Fell as well when we get to him. He's a fun one. He'll be a fun one to talk about. But yeah, that was fun. Next week, Matthew will be back. We'll be going over Skeleton Crew the full season, and so join us for that. So once again, you can find us at Ion Cannon at Blue Sky, EYEONCANONPOD, at bluesky.com. You can find me at JID20234 at Blue Sky. I'm also on the Star Wars Underworld Discord. Check us out there. we might be hosting a movie night this week. I have arranged it for a stream, so be on the lookout for that. We haven't decided yet just what the movie can be, but be on the lookout for that. We hope to do that soon. Yeah. Thanks again, Red, for joining us. I hope we can do this soon. And until next time, everybody, let's blow this thing and head home.